Welcome to the Neurokrish Immersion. We begin this episode asking you a question. Are you wired for risk? And in this episode, we are exploring entrepreneurship, uncertainty, and the neuroscience of leaps of faith. Let me start with a moment from Walter Isaacson's biography of Elon Musk. SpaceX is collapsing. 3 rockets have failed. His other company, Tesla, is close to bankruptcy. Investors are exhausted. Employees are frightened. The world believes the experiment is over. Most rational people would retreat. Most would endeavor to preserve what remained. Instead, Musk reinvests nearly everything. So we go to the deeper question. Why are some human beings willing to leap into uncertainty while others remain paralyzed by it? Let me ask that to you again. Why are some human beings willing to leap into uncertainty while others remain paralyzed by it? Why do people leave stable careers to pursue impossible visions, create companies, challenge existing systems, reinvent themselves entirely? And while others remain neurologically attached to certainty. What drives risk taking? And of course, risk taking is perhaps what is most important here. Is it personality that drives it? Is it culture? Is it trauma? Is it dopamine, that addictive chemical in your brain? Is it social contagion? Or is it something deeper within the architecture of the brain? And that's what we are talking about in today's episode. We are exploring the neuroscience and psychology of risk. Not merely financial risk, but emotional risk, creative risk, existential risk, entrepreneurial risk, and the human capacity to move towards uncertainty itself. Because this is what entrepreneurship may ultimately be: the human brain attempting to create possibility in the face of uncertainty. Human beings often imagine themselves as rational creatures. But evolution did not optimize our brain for truth. It optimized the brain for survival. And uncertainty is dangerous for survival. The brain is fundamentally a prediction machine. What happens next? Is this safe? Should I approach or avoid? At the center of this system lies the amygdala, and we've talked about this structure many times in the Neurokrish Immersion. It houses our emotions. And when uncertainty rises, vigilance rises, autonomic arousal escalates, and cortisol rises. Most human beings are neurologically biased towards certainty, even if that certainty is limiting, even if it is painful. What uncertainty does is that it lights up your amygdala because you're experiencing anxiety, fear, and you are getting autonomically aroused and starting to release cortisol. And this is one reason why people stay put. They remain in unhappy jobs, they avoid reinventing themselves, they suppress creative impulses, and they simply fear entrepreneurship because uncertainty itself creates physiological discomfort. And here lies the first entrepreneurial paradox. Entrepreneurs voluntarily move toward uncertainty. And if you listen to my talk on leaps of faith earlier in this podcast, I talk about the BBC experiment where entrepreneurs stood out in being willing to take a big risk in deciding to throw something really far, much further than most other people could throw. Do listen to that episode as well. Modern neuroscience suggests that the brain processes pursuing gains and avoiding losses through partially distinct neural systems. In a review by Levin and colleagues, they propose that risky decision making reflects a negotiation between reward participation and fear of loss. It's not that entrepreneurs simply love reward. It may be that they process uncertainty and loss differently from other people. It's not that the entrepreneurial brain may experience less fear. It may simply remain functional in its presence. So let's talk a little bit about the entrepreneurial brain itself. I go back to Isaacson's biography, which repeatedly portrays Musk as someone who is drawn towards the impossible. Impossible missions, massive uncertainty, extreme stakes, existential goals. Going to Mars, launching electric vehicles of different forms, artificial intelligence, reusable rockets. And from one perspective, this appears irrational. Neuroscience suggests something more nuanced than this. It is that entrepreneurial brains often assign reward not merely to success, but to novelty, to challenge, to future possibility, to creation itself. The entrepreneur is neurologically oriented towards what could exist rather than what currently exists. Dopamine, which we talk about a lot, is not simply the pleasure chemical. It is linked to anticipation, to pursuit, to prediction, to motivational salience. It's therefore less about pleasure and more about the motivational pull towards what is not yet real. And in that way, dopamine has been deeply misunderstood. In a study from the University of Pennsylvania, where they looked at data from multiple brain scans, over almost 10,000 brain scans, risk-taking behavior correlated not with one risk center, but with distributed systems involving emotional processing, reward valuation, salience detection, and decision-making networks. And the entrepreneurial paradox becomes very clear. The entrepreneur may simultaneously be visionary, anxious, emotionally volatile, highly driven, intensely future oriented, in many ways dynamically negotiating uncertainty. It's not that the entrepreneurial brain is calm, it is often dynamically negotiating uncertainty. So, can adversity alter the brain's relationship with uncertainty? Isaacson's biography hints at a certain personality type capable of bullying, emotional hardness, social isolation, and intensity. And this raises an uncomfortable question. Can adversity alter the brain's relationship with uncertainty? And we must be careful here because trauma should never be romanticized. Most suffering damages rather than transforms people. But we do know in neuroscience that adversity can reshape the brain. Threat perception, emotional resilience, reward systems, future orientation, all this is affected by adversity. And some individuals emerge from hardship with emotional desensitization, hyperachievement, and an unusual tolerance for instability. So, like many things in life, adversity can have two outcomes. One outcome is that it weakens. The other outcome is that it strengthens. And with that strength comes the capacity to be desensitized to emotional stimuli, to hyperachieve, and to be very, very tolerant of instability. Achievement therefore becomes an identity. it becomes compensation, it becomes meaning, it becomes survival. And this is one reason why entrepreneurship is rarely just economic behavior, it is often existential behavior. The mission, the company, the innovation itself, these may become identity structures, future simulations, mechanisms of significance. And this is the deeper psychology beneath the pitch deck, the product launch, the fundraising round. The mission has become the identity structure. Entrepreneurs have very specific cognitive traits that they display: pattern recognition, associative thinking, connecting the dots, future simulation, and an unusual tolerance for ambiguity. This strongly overlaps with creativity, and creativity itself, as we have discussed earlier, is deeply neurological. The brain networks that are involved when you are going through a creative phase include the default mode networks, the salience systems, and the executive networks. And in moments of insight, these systems synchronize. I've talked about this in the Inspired Brain podcast, I think probably in the second or the third edition. Do listen. The brain becomes capable of abstraction, imagination, and future construction. Isaacson repeatedly describes Musk entering a certain mode where he is extremely intense. It's a period of relentless intensity, emotional volatility, and extraordinary productivity. He is talked of sleeping beneath his desk and not going home during these periods. And this is not just romanticization. Most dysregulation destroys lives rather than transforms industries. But history repeatedly suggests that extraordinary creativity often exists in tension with stability. And there is a thin line, therefore, between vision and obsession. Visionary thinking often requires temporary immunity to consensus reality. One of the great myths of entrepreneurship is that it's purely individual. Neuroscience, however, suggests that something deeply social is occurring. Human beings regulate uncertainty through peers, through culture, through imitation, through aspiration, and in that way, risk taking is deeply social. Lawrence Steinberg's influential model, which is focused on the teens, demonstrates that risk taking emerges through interaction between socio emotional reward systems and cognitive control systems. We've talked about the tug of war, and we've talked about limbic impulses and frontal control, and here we see a little parallel here. Importantly, human beings become more risk taking in socially amplified environments. And this may explain startup cultures, it may explain Silicon Valley and innovation ecosystems. In India, we have Bengaluru, which has become an IT innovation hub. And these are not merely economic structures, they are socially amplified prediction systems. So, what do we learn from figures like Musk? Human beings continuously absorb what is admired, what is possible, what survives uncertainty. Whether admired or criticized, figures like Musk alter collective imagination. Human beings do not merely inherit genes, we inherit perceived possibilities. So, why do most people not leap? The answer is not laziness nor lack of intelligence. The answer is often uncertainty aversion, loss sensitivity, social fear, autonomic threat activation. The anterior insula in your brain is deeply involved in interoception and anticipation of loss, and it becomes active when uncertainty looms. For some individuals, uncertainty feels exciting. For others, uncertainty feels physiologically threatening. Human beings are not simply courageous or fearful, they are selectively courageous. And risk is multidimensional. The individual willing to build companies may fear emotional vulnerability. The artist may tolerate creative uncertainty but not financial instability. And in this way, risk is therefore very multidimensional. Each one of us needs to understand where our own threshold lies as a form of self knowledge. So, can you cultivate risk tolerance? Not everyone becomes an entrepreneur, nor should they. But uncertainty tolerance can absolutely be cultivated. And how do you do that? Through emotional regulation, through building nervous system stability, through cognitive reframing, through building resilience, through reflective awareness. Because courage is not merely moral, courage is neurological. And we need to appreciate that the entrepreneurial brain is therefore not simply impulsive, reckless, or fearless. At its best, it is emotionally regulated imagination. Courage is the nervous system learning not to collapse in the presence of uncertainty. Which brings us back to the leap of faith. Some people leap into companies, into art, into reinvention, into ideas, into relationships, into entirely new identities. Every meaningful human life eventually encounters uncertainty. And there is therefore the universal question which all of us confront at some point in time. Will I remain within the safety of the known or move towards possibility? Perhaps the greatest risk in life is not failure, but the slow surrender of imagination. Isaacson's biography of Musk is ultimately not just a story about technology. It's a story about uncertainty, obsession, imagination, ambition, emotional intensity, and the extraordinary tension between possibility and collapse. From this, we learn some brains seek certainty, others seek horizons. And perhaps civilizations advance because some human beings continue imagining futures that do not yet exist. But sustainable progress requires ambition in dialogue with regulation. Every meaningful human life eventually requires a leap into uncertainty, and the entrepreneurial brain is, at its core, the brain that dares to imagine possibility before proof. Thank you for joining us at the Neurokrish Immersion. Stay curious, stay reflective, and stay willing to live. If you like what we do here, do subscribe and share. We are on Apple, YouTube, and Spotify.